Protesters against President Donald Trump gathered and marched in Washington, D.C. as votes were being counted in the United States just after midnight. Video footage showed protesters marching and singing as they marched down 17th Street in D.C. towards Black Lives Matter Plaza near the White House. Demonstrations in the nation's capital have remained largely peaceful, with only 3 protesters arrested close to the White House. Now, we are being joined by Rachel Silverman live from California for more on this. Good afternoon to you. Well, good morning to you, Rachel. Thank you for your time. Now, people have come out onto the streets. Take us through the latest on the ground. These demonstrations in the Capitol have been mostly peaceful, but 3 protesters have been arrested close to the White House.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that people have now come out onto the streets in protest. Take us through the latest on the ground. We do believe that these demonstrations in the nation's capital have been mostly peaceful, but 3 people have been arrested close to the White House. What is the situation on the ground?
Well, I'm here in California, and I must say that after today's announcement by President Trump that he thought that he falsely described the situation as a major fraud in our nation in terms of the election. It's a very real possibility that people will start taking to the streets. Election laws in the United States all allow for all the votes to be counted, and there are millions of votes still uncounted, and so that's what these and the announcement by the president was sort of a firecracker for people who are unhappy about how he's treated this election.
Trump says that he will approach the Supreme Court if the decision is unfavorable to him. Now, is there any legal basis to this, and what does American law say about this?
I think most lawyers and legal analysts would tell you that he doesn't have any legal ground to stop the vote counting. He had been expected to pursue a freeze, but that was only on counting mass mail-in ballots. His team still might, but judges would use the words to gauge his intent, especially since he questioned why vote tallying was halted in places where he's leading. He said we need to stop. We need to do this so that we stop the voting. People aren't still voting. People are still counting the votes. Voting stopped when the polls closed on Tuesday night. This is it's not a surprise because the president kind of telegraphed that he might do this, but it's a kind of a shocking a situation in a democracy to have the leader say, "Okay, I win," before the authorities who count the votes have a chance to do so and then announce what the count is. There are still 5 important battleground states that are in play, including Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. They're still counting the millions of mail-in ballots that their state laws said they couldn't begin counting until Election Day, and it may take several days to complete that count.
Right, Rachel. Absolutely, the most mature democracy in the world, the oldest democracy in the world, for a president to be saying that. Democratic presidential Joe Biden's camp says that Trump's bid to stop vote counting is, he has used the words, quote unquote, outrageous and unprecedented. In a statement from Biden's campaign, they said that legal teams are ready to deploy if needed. What do we make of this?
Well, there will be lawyers on both sides fighting against this sort of thing, and we'll have to see how this comes about tomorrow. It's the wee hours of the morning in Washington, but I'm sure the lawyers are are burning the midnight oil, figuring out their strategies about how they're going to proceed tomorrow.
Rachel, thank you very much for bringing us all the latest. They're joining us from California in this election. Now, counting is still underway in 5 battleground states, and they could very well end up deciding who becomes the next president of the United States. My colleague Priyanka Sharma decodes the race in these 5 states.
Thanks, Alison. Absolutely. All eyes are on the U.S. election. And while President Trump may have already all but declared victory, the fact of the matter is there are still 5 key states where counting is still underway. And these key states could very well decide the outcome of the U.S. election. And I'm going to be taking you through the stats in these very states. Now, remember, the magic number to keep in mind is 270. That is the number of electoral college votes that are needed by each candidate to take the White House. So let's begin by telling you about these 5 key states which could decide the outcome of the election. Let's begin now with Wisconsin. Now remember, Wisconsin is a key state and it has 10 electoral votes to offer to each candidate, and it was won by Trump in the 2016 election. As far as polling predictions go, right now President Trump is leading with 51%, while candidate Joe Biden is lagging by 47.5% of the vote. Now remember, this is a very tight race. It's a nail biter for sure. Let's move on to the next key state now, and that is Michigan. Now remember, Michigan was a state where Biden was leading in the opinion polls. 30% of the votes still need to be counted. For now, the predictions show that 53.2% of the votes is with Donald Trump, the current president, while Biden has 45.2% of the vote. This again is another crucial state that could decide the outcome of the U.S. election, and counting is still underway. So it's too soon to be calling any results. Let's move on to the next state, which is Pennsylvania. It is also known as a keystone state, and it's a very crucial state in this election, which is being dubbed the most controversial election in recent history. Now, in Pennsylvania, there are plenty of votes that are still to be counted, and only 39% of mail-in ballots have been counted so far. As far as Pennsylvania is concerned, it has 20 electoral votes to offer, and Trump is likely to win this state. Issues like fracking and Biden's stance on fracking has worked against him as far as his campaigning is concerned. And for now, polling predictions say that 55.8% of the votes lie with Donald Trump, while Biden has 43% of the votes. Moving on to the next state, which is North Carolina. Now, North Carolina has 15 electoral states votes to offer. Now, remember, 270 is the magic number to remember. The candidate needs 270 votes to take the White House. And as far as North Carolina is concerned, it has 15 electoral votes to offer. President Trump is leading here yet again with 50.1% of the votes, while Biden has 49.7% of the votes. Moving on to the next state, which is Georgia. That is the 5th and the final one. It has 16 electoral votes to offer. And yet again, here too, President Trump is leading with 50.5% of the votes, while Biden has 48.3% of the votes. Now, it's very important to remember that North Carolina and Georgia are key states, and they could very well decide the outcome of this election. We are closely tracking all the results, but till now, it is too soon to call the final results. Back to you, Alison.
Priyanka, thank you very much for that breakdown there. Now we are being joined by writer and former BBC senior journalist Andrew Whitehead. For more on this, thank you for your time. Now, this is an election that has shown to be record-breaking on a number of fronts. This is a very close race. Some major swing states have already been won. What is your view of the election so far?
Well, it is dreadfully close. That's why the networks haven't called this election. I've been looking actually in the last few minutes at the political betting websites, which are sometimes a quite good indicator. They now have President Trump as the odds-on favourite. So that's one indicator. On the other hand, the New York Times is now saying that Joe Biden is looking like, far from certain, but looking like that he may take Georgia. If he takes Georgia, he then needs to win either Michigan or Pennsylvania to get to the 270 electoral college votes. He doesn't need to win both. So it's looking very close indeed, and I'm not going to stick my neck out.
Right now, after trailing Joe Biden for the better part of the initial trends, Donald Trump won in the stronghold of Texas. Now, this was considered to be an exceptional victory for the Republicans.
Yes, Texas, Ohio, Florida were all states which were seen as in play. Some of the opinion polls in recent days have been suggesting that these were within Joe Biden's grasp. And in fact, Donald Trump won them all, in some cases, particularly Ohio, fairly comfortably. And certainly Donald Trump has been outperforming the opinion polls. Not only that, but given the very high turnout, he's been getting more raw votes than he got 4 years ago. But, I mean, he needed to win these states. Joe Biden didn't need to win the states. He needs to win Michigan and Pennsylvania. And if he does that, the Democrats will win the White House.
He's been getting more raw votes, yes, as has Biden, more raw votes than even Hillary Clinton. I think this has been a record-breaking election so far in a number of ways. What do we make of President Trump's announcement of victory so early on before there were any final vote counts?
Well, this is his style, isn't it? It wasn't a formal victory speech. He just said, frankly, I've won. And that's very much the way he says it. He's very bullish. He talks things up. But within a few minutes, the vice president, Mike Pence, had rather calmed things down and said, we're going to wait till all the votes are counted. Now, there is the prospect, and President Trump talked about it, the prospect of legal action to stop mail-in ballots being counted, perhaps in states such as Pennsylvania. But at the moment, that's simply talk. The focus of the action remains on the counting centres, not on the courtrooms.
Right, Andrew. And then there are the 5 key battleground swing states that we are still waiting for results. What is your view or your analysis of what we can expect from these and how important this is going to be on either side?
Well, absolutely crucial, of course. Georgia is, as I say, leaning towards Joe Biden, and that would be quite a big victory for the Democrats to take Georgia, a southern state which voted for President Trump 4 years ago. The real drama is going to be in Michigan and Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania in particular, because of the large overhang of mail-in ballots that still have to be counted. President Trump is clearly polling better there, quite a lot better than the opinion polls suggested. With the votes counted to date, he has a comfortable lead, but the supposition is that the mail-in ballots which have not yet been counted will lean quite heavily to Joe Biden. So that is still anybody's guess.
And what do you think of the setup of the 2 war rooms? That one has been set up in the Eisenhower building, one in the White House. Is this yet another blurring of the lines, if you will, between government and politicking?
President Trump does things his own way. He's not a career politician. What he does is reality TV, and he's doing it very effectively. He has been a wonderfully effective campaigner and communicator. And actually, the people who are voting for him can't say they didn't know what they're getting. They're voting after 4 years of a really very controversial and in many ways deeply divisive presidency. So the fact that he's setting up war rooms, it's his style. I don't read too much more into it than that.
And we know that this election was being touted as a bit of a referendum on his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. And with him winning Texas as an example, that is such a terribly affected state by that, what do we make of this?
Well, I think this election is very largely a referendum on President Trump, not just on the pandemic, but on his handling of the economy, which is much stronger ground for him, and indeed his record on law and order, which I think has certainly helped him in some of the swing states. But it does seem that, I mean, from afar, his handling of the pandemic seems to have been fairly lamentable. But for American voters, they clearly are much more forgiving, shall we say.
Andrew, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us for all the latest on these US elections.